Hi, I'm Corolla. In this video, we're going to talk about fountain pens. I'm going to give my answers to the 8 more pen questions, a continuation of the 8 pen questions from Leanne and Simone, and I'll tell you what my favorite fountain pens are, how I choose to ink them up, and what are my favorite nib grinds, and also what are some pens that other people should own. So we're going to talk about fountain pens, nibs, inks, and all that. Let's get into it. Hi, so I'm going to go through my answers to the 8 more questions. The 8 questions that Simone and Leanne started last year. There are 8 more questions for 2025. If you want to join in, feel free to record your video and tag 8 more pen questions 2025 as a hashtag. And definitely join in the conversation and share your answers. So my answers for the 8 more pen questions. First, do you have different uses for different pens? I certainly do. I have a pen tray that sits on my desk, and it includes pens that I use for different purposes, mostly because they're based on the type of pen, the nib, and for me, it's less so about the ink. It's more so to do with the pen and the nib. So, for example, I have an SD from Esterbrook that has a broad journaler nib. And I use this for my daily journaling and archiving of daily events. And because the broad journaler is really comfortable to write with, I find that I do a lot of journaling and writing with this. This nib was custom ground for me by Gina from Custom Nib Studio. You can get a journaler in an SD from Esterbrook through the special nib program. I also have a Platinum Century 3776 with a UEF nib, so needlepoint. And I use this for basically detailed writing, or when I really need that super fine 0.38 style of line. I have it inked with Platinum Carbon Black, and it's just a cartridge that I use. So for me, it's not necessarily about the ink. It's just a typical, really nice black ink. But for me, it's more about the nib. Then I have the Pilot Vanishing Point in matte black. Very classic. And the nib is in broad. And I use this for just taking notes whenever I need to. It's just one of those pens that I like to have as an EDC or everyday carry. It's always on my desk, ready to be used. And I like the clicky aspect of it. Speaking of clicky, I also have a Pilot Vanishing Point with a medium nib. And this one is inked up with Tsukiyo from Pilot Irishizuku, while this Pilot Vanishing Point in broad is inked up with Takesumi, which is also from Pilot. And I like that I have a broad and a medium VP just based on the different lines that I might need and different inks, so black and a blue. Then I also have a Skogsy Baby Saguaro. This is an independent maker, and I love the size of it. It's a pocket pen, so it's portable, easy to carry, and it's made in an ultim finish. Indestructible, basically, and very lightweight. The nib that I have in it is a double broad SIG, so stub italic gradient, ground by Audrey for Franklin Christoph. And I have it inked up with Platinum Chokuro, which is touted as the blackest of all blacks. So really, it's a really nice black ink. And I love this pen because not only is it portable, but I love the line of it that it writes. And so it's great for having some interest or adding some interest to my journals in terms of headers or emphasizing something. Then I have the Pilot Custom 823. The nib that I have in it is a signature nib, and so it's very comfortable to write with, and also you can fill it with a lot of ink. The ink that I have in it is a gray, Dominant Industry collaboration with Wonder Pens called Tuna Gray, and it's just one of those grays that I always have in this pen. I don't have to change it out, and whenever I want to write with a gray ink, in terms of like letters and things like that, I turn towards this pen. So this pen tray sits on my desk, and these are all pens that I use for various different uses throughout the day, and I love reaching out for them. So all that to say, my answer to the first question is yes, I have pens that have specific uses. So how do you choose inks or pens you will use next? That's a great question. How do we choose pens that we're going to ink up next? For me, it's about choosing a nib and choosing a pen that speaks to me. So I have various different pens that I can choose from. A lot of them can be interchanged, so I can change up the nib unit depending on the kind of nib that I want to write with. So for me, the fun part is not just choosing the ink that I'm going to use, but also the kind of nib that I want to write with. So I have a lot of custom ground nibs, and I can play around with the different line variations that I want to use. For me, most of the time I do match up the ink to the pen just because it's kind of fun for me to do that. It's not a must for me, so I do sometimes break that rule for myself by going with a brighter ink or a complementary ink to the pen. But for the most part, I do kind of enjoy pushing myself to pick out an ink that may be out of the norm. So it's not like a typical classic blue or green, but it'll be something bright that can go with a bright pen. Which pen do you prefer for longer writing periods? That's also a great question, because for me, it's about the pen that fits into my hand and gives me a great writing experience. So it's about balance, it's about the size of the pen, and it's also about the nib that I can have in that pen. So for longer writing periods, I love the classic sort of cigar shape. My favorite go-to of this type of pen would be the Esterbrook SD, just because it sits really nicely in my hand and it feels very comfortable to write with. And I tend to write longer journaling sessions with this type of pen. In this pen, I have the Techo nib, which is also from the special nib program that Esterbrook offers. It is ground by CY from Tokyo Station Pens, and this combination of the Techo nib in the Esterbrook SD is such a great pen for me for writing sessions. What is your all-time favorite pen? So for me, again, I think my all-time favorite pen, because it is such a great combination of pen and nib and the design of the pen itself, the Esterbrook SD with a Techo nib is my all-time favorite pen. I got it a couple of years ago, and I have since pretty much inked it up nonstop, so it's always inked. And it's just one of those pens that I enjoy my writing experience with. I can't explain it because I have other SDs. I have other SDs in great colorways that I love, but there's something about the color, design, the style of pen, and the nib that's in it that keeps me reaching for this pen and makes it my favorite pen. A runner-up to my favorite pen would be the Sailor Pro Gear Slim, and this model is called Sunset Over the Ocean. It's a North American exclusive from a few years ago, and I love this because to me it's like a classic sailor pen because it reminds me of a lighthouse. It was one of those sailor pens that I needed to own just because I love that blue and red combination. This makes such a cute pen for me. If you have to choose one nib size, which one would it be? I would choose a broad because I love a broad line, but also because if I wanted to, I could get a broad nib custom ground. So if I was stuck with one stock nib for the rest of my life, I would choose broad because not only can I use it stock, but I can also get a grind out of it. So I started my fountain pen journey with extra fines and fines, and I have found that over the past year or two I've evolved to the broader nibs because for me seeing the ink properties is part of the enjoyment of writing with fountain pens now. And so the broader the line, the more enjoyable it is for me to use that pen. It's my favorite nib grind. So I would say a variation of a Naginata Togi would be my favorite nib grind. So my all-time favorite pen and also nib that I really enjoy writing with is the Techo nib from CY. It gives you a finer line when you're writing at a higher angle and a broader line when you're writing at a lower angle. So this was custom ground by CY for me. It's called a mini Sunkuksen, and it's basically the Techo nib. And I'll show you what it writes like. So at a higher angle, you get a bit of a finer line. And at a lower angle, so if, for example, you're practicing cursive, you get that really smooth, broader line. And it just makes it really fun for me to journal with, especially because I do a lot of stream of consciousness writing and just putting thoughts onto paper. And I like having the option of writing at my normal handwriting and then also writing cursive when I'm writing, just thoughts down on paper. And so that varying line degree is very, very fun for me. And so I would say there are different variations of this type of writing style from different nib specialists. And so I would say, any one of those variations really speaks to me in terms of just being fun and being an everyday journaling nib for me. If I could use one ink for the rest of my life, that would be Punishment, because as you can see, I like varying ink colors, and sometimes they will be, a variety of black, gray, brown, and blue. But also I love throwing in some bright colors every now and then just to change it up and just to keep the joy of writing alive, and to keep me engaged in using fountain pens and changing up the inks. So all that to say is I don't like this question. I think it's punishment for those of us who are really into pens to try and choose just one ink. But if I had to play this game and I had to choose one ink, I would say Pilot Iroshizuku Tsukiyo. And that's what I have inked up in my Pilot Vanishing Point. It is this blue. And the reason why I would say Pilot Iroshizuku Tsukiyo as my all-time sort of one ink that I would always turn to is because it is one of those reliable inks that I can throw into a new pen or a new nib to test it out, because I know that it will react well and it won't give me any trouble starting and stopping, and it won't be too wet or too dry, and all those properties that might play into different inks. And so it's a blue, it's not a black. And it's also sort of this dark blue that I can put into any pen and it will go fine. So yes, if I was going to play this game, just one ink, I would go with Pilot Irishizuku Tsukio. An absolute deal breaker for me in terms of pens and inks. So for me, if a pen is uncomfortable to hold, then it's a deal breaker. I won't use it, and I will try and move on from there. And by uncomfortable, I mean if the grip is not comfortable to hold while I'm writing, or if any part of the barrel sort of sits awkwardly within my wrist and it just makes it uncomfortable, then I will walk away from the pen. I think for me, a lot of the enjoyment of using fountain pens versus a regular ballpoint or any other kind of pen is the comfort that the pen provides, as well as the flexibility of using different ink colors and using different nibs. And so if initially I don't think the pen is comfortable to hold, then it will sort of ruin the rest of the writing experience for me. In terms of nibs, a deal breaker for me is a scratchy nib. I will not write with a scratchy nib. I'll get it smoothed or tuned by a nib specialist, or I will move on from that pen. So if you have a scratchy nib, remember it can be fixed. You can take it to a nib specialist and get it smoothed for your writing experience, regardless of whether, it's part of the pen problem or if it's the way that you're gripping the pen maybe. But life is too short to write with a scratchy nib, so don't do it. In terms of inks, probably for me, a deal breaker would be if it's too light to read. So if I'm using a pen to write with and I can't read my writing, then I guess that's a deal breaker for me. So inks that are not legible, I will probably use for painting or for other purposes. But if it's for writing, I need to be able to read the ink. And so anything that's too light, too beige, too unable to be read, I will walk away from. Bonus question: what is one pen everyone should have? So I think I'm going to answer this in terms of whether you're a beginner or starter, or if you're into pens, what is one of those pens that you should probably just have in your collection, and what is something that you can aspire to or add to your collection as you move on in your journey. I'm a firm believer that if you're starting in your journey, there's no point in starting at the very top. So getting a pen that, is really expensive and really finicky to work with, or the filling system, is like a vac filler and you have to sort of play around with getting it right. I would say start simple. So if you're starting on the journey, start simple and work your way towards the kinds of pens that speak to you, that bring you enjoyment, not everyone else. So for me, I think everyone who's starting in the fountain pen journey should probably try a Platinum Preppy or a Pilot Kakuno or any one of those pens that are similar. And part of the reason is because it gets you into the feel of the nib. Platinum, Pilot, those are great nibs to start with. And this one is a Muji Preppy, so a Muji version of the Platinum Preppy, similar in style and nib type. And it's also a pen that you can throw a cartridge into. I feel like this is a great pen to have even if you are anywhere in that journey of using a fountain pen, because this I can throw carbon black or one of those cartridges in, for example, waterproof inks that may be finicky with some other fountain pens that may not be easy to clean off. I find that throwing a cartridge into this type of pen and having it sit there that you can reach for quick writing, or if someone wants to try a fountain pen, I reach for this fountain pen to let them try it, because not only will it give them a feel for what a fountain pen is like, but also what a great nib writes like, and trying out, different types of ink cartridges. So I think everyone should have a loaner pen or a starter pen that you can throw an ink cartridge into, easily portable, and anyone can try it out. I think once you're sort of into your fountain pen journey, I would say the Esterbrook Esty is a great pen to own or to have, or a similar style of pen. I love the shape. I think it's very comfortable to hold, and I think it's worth trying out this type of pen. So if you're into gold nibs or you want to try a gold nib, I would recommend looking into Platinum, Pilot, or Sailor and seeing which pen speaks to you in terms of style and size, and then trying them out. Once you're in your fountain pen journey, you've fallen off and fallen down the rabbit hole, I'd say, then I would recommend finding an independent pen maker and checking out their pens, checking out their style, and if there's one that you like, I would recommend grabbing one of their pens that allow you to interchange the nib unit easily. So this one is a Franklin Christoph, and it's a pocket pen, pocket 20, and it allows you to interchange the nib unit. It's a number 6 Yovo, and what this allows you to do is get custom ground nibs or try different nib sizes. So you can try, extra fine, medium, broad, double broad. You could also get custom ground nibs and then throw them in here depending on, again, what you feel like writing with, what you want to ink it up with. And it doesn't have to be, a bunch of different types of maker pens, but I would suggest checking out some makers. If you can get to a pen show, that's probably the best way of doing it, but also online through your community. Find some makers that are local to you or that speak to you in terms of the style and materials that they use, and grab one of their pens and support the community, support independent pen makers. And it's just a fun way of being a part of the fountain pen community and supporting everyone and using different types of nibs in a pen that you really enjoy. And I think some of the pens that bring me real joy in writing are not necessarily the pens that are really expensive or that have gold nibs, but for me, they're the ones that are made by independent makers who put a lot of passion and thought into the pens that they make, and that is clearly shown in the products that they offer. And I love that you can switch out the nib units depending on the type of nib that you want to write with. So those were my answers to the 8 more questions in 2025, the continuation of the 8 more questions from Simone and Leanne from last year. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that was fun. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Corolla on Instagram. I'm at From Corolla. I would love to know what your answers would be. Appreciate you. Thank you for being part of the community, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.